good to be here with you. I think you've been sitting for a little while, so I'd love you all to stand up, introduce yourself to one person and share with them the bravest thing you've ever done. Up you go. Just take 1 minute now, introduce yourself to someone and share the bravest thing you've ever done. Okay, now you can all sit down, please. Thank you. So, I would like to just know, thank you. I would just like it to know if the bravest thing put your hand up, if the bravest thing you ever did was something that you look back on and you are really glad that you did. Put your hand up if that's the case for you. Okay, for the majority of you, yes it is. You know, it's funny just listening to Yasko there because I once thought about joining Cirque du Soleil myself. And I was living in Washington, D.C., and a friend said to me, would you like to go off for a morning at circus school? It was literally called circus school. And I thought, that sounds like fun. I've never done anything like that. Maybe I've missed my calling. Maybe I really should have been on the high wire. So I went off with some girlfriends to this trapeze school underneath the big tent. And I had jumped out of a plane when I was in my early 20s and thought, well, how hard can it be? All you have to do is just climb up about 8 meters, 25 feet, reach out, grab a bar. So they did a practice at ground level and I thought, I don't need to do that. I was just sort of chatting away with my friends. Then it was my turn to climb up the rope ladder and stand on the platform. So I climbed up, I was in a harness, I had this big bulky guy behind me, and we had been told we were supposed to reach out from the platform, grab the bar, swing through the air, then put our knees over it, and a guy from the other side who was a professional would come out, grab us, and we would have this beautiful Cirque du Soleil moment. It was going to be magical, and then we would fall to the safety net. Well, I got up there, and I went to reach out, and suddenly that drop to the safety net seemed a lot further than I thought it was going to seem. And I froze. And that was a little bit embarrassing for me because I've written books on how to be brave, I speak on this, and there I was up there, frozen in terror. And intellectually, I knew there was no way known I could fall to my death. I had a harness on, there was a safety net, but I still was just paralyzed. And I started shaking and I felt like crying. And my friends, it was very annoying. They started quoting my book titles to me. Find your courage, stop playing safe. So out of pure pride and wanting to avoid professional humiliation, I reached out, I grabbed the bar, and I swung through the air just screaming. Totally forgot to put my knees over the bar. And after about 4 oscillations, realized, oh, that's right, I have to let go. Dropped to the safety net. And I realized I hadn't missed my calling. I share that story with you because fear is a powerful emotion. And so far this morning, we've heard about innovation and disruption and getting out there and being creative. And yet the biggest barrier to any organization or individual's growth isn't competitors and it isn't technological disruption and it's not artificial intelligence. The biggest threat is the fear that keeps smart, capable, creative people from taking risks, from reaching out and leaving the safety of the known for the uncertainty of what is yet to be explored. And so as I share with you today some ideas on how you can find your courage and stop playing safe, I want you just to think about the challenges that you're dealing with in your job and role right now. And perhaps some of the challenging people. Does anyone here work with someone that you think of as a challenging person? Put your hand up. Are they next to you? No. Okay. Because, let's face it, yes, human beings, human capital is the biggest resource in any organization, but our human interactions with other people are often where things come undone because it's so frustrating that people don't always see eye to eye. And sometimes the issues that we need to explore and discuss and talk about with people don't get discussed because they're uncomfortable. So the fact is that as human beings, our desire for comfort and for safety and for security is in this tug of war with our desire for growth and learning and contribution. And even though we may know what we should do, and even though as I stood there, I knew that this was a good thing, reach out, do it, I was still frozen. And so we have to be really careful about where fear keeps us from putting ourselves out there, from exploring new ideas, from trying new things, from challenging our own assumptions and mental maps of what we can and can't do, from having sometimes the difficult, what I call courageous conversations. So I actually grew up on a dairy farm in rural Australia, one of 7 kids. And leading up to my 10th birthday, my father, milked cows, wasn't a lot of money in milking cows. And I pleaded, can I have a horse? Can I have a horse? And finally on my 10th birthday, Dad got me a horse. And I got out there, and this is me on my 10th birthday. That's my horse, Robbie. My sister broke her arm that day to try and upstage me. I wasn't happy. And every morning I would get out there and I would bridle Robbie up before school. He seemed so much bigger than I was looking for a little pony, and I got this horse. Dad, he was 23 years old. I think Dad got him kind of cheap. I don't know if any of you know about horses, but 23 is getting a little bit long in the tooth. And after a year, I got pretty good at riding Robbie. But he was really slow. In fact, he only kind of walked, he plodded. And then I started pleading, can I get another horse? Can I get one that goes faster? Well, there wasn't any money, but Dad went in a raffle for a horse. And believe it or not, we won a horse when I was 12 years old. Now, this horse came from the Australian snowy mountains, the high country, and he was wild. He went from 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. So I had to dial up my courage all over again and learn to ride this crazy horse. I ended up becoming the barrel racing champion of my little tiny area. But I share that with you because growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. And if we only do what we're comfortable with, we will never do what we're capable of. And courage, bravery, the willingness to take risks, to risk falling off, to risk making an idiot of yourself, to risk trying something and making a mistake, to risk an awkward conversation, to risk rejection for any of you in sales. We only build our muscles to get better at it when we do it. You can read all the books in the world, but unless you're in action, you will not be able to do what it is you're capable of. Forge the new ground, create the results. And just being here this morning, it's extraordinary, the exponential growth that you have had. But to continue on that path will require everybody pulling together, being brave, and being willing to forge that ground together. So I want to touch on 6 different ideas with you. Firstly, I want to go through reframing risk, setting a bold course, upgrading the mental maps of how to get from point A to point B, learning to fail forward, speaking bravely, and creating a culture that brings out the bravest in those around you. Because as human beings, people play safe when they feel unsafe not to. So risk, you guys are in the risk business. That's what you do. There's often we think of risk sometimes as a bad thing. But what we often don't think about is what is the cost? What's the risk if I don't take a risk? Where is it that playing safe can ultimately get me in trouble? So a few years ago, I took my son, Ben. I have 4 children, by the way. And people sometimes ask me what's the bravest thing I ever did, having child number 4. So just to illustrate this point, we are wired in different ways to avoid risk. The first way is we overestimate the risks and we focus more on what could go wrong than on what might go right, and I'll share a story with you in a moment about that. We also tend to catastrophize the outcomes. We can easily get ourselves really wound up and afraid of what will happen, and we come up with these worst case scenarios when most of the time that stuff doesn't happen. We also tend to underestimate ourselves. And while it sounds like the women here at FWD are pretty bold, is that right? From picking up that this morning? Yeah. Can you just give a round of applause for the women at FWD? I'm sorry, women often underestimate themselves more than men, tend to doubt themselves more, back themselves less, generally speaking, but clearly not here. So I am just go women. We also tend to discount the cost of inaction. We tell ourselves, well, if I don't try this, it's okay. But as you know, when the world is changing this fast, unless we are changing and adapting really fast as well, we get left behind. And finally, people are wired to protect the status quo. And often when there's a lot of uncertainty, you know, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, change, and ambiguity, people kind of hunker down and go, oh, I'm just going to protect my patch of dirt. But when people are playing not to lose versus playing to win, when they're in the defensive, that actually costs everyone because people aren't sharing, they're not exploring, they're not experimenting. So getting back to my son Ben, a couple of years ago, Ben was turning 13 and I said, what would you like to do for your 13th birthday? And he goes, I was waiting for him to say some Xbox game, and he goes, I'd like to go skydiving. I thought, what the hell? So I went out, I got him a certificate to go skydiving, one of those double dives, and I was driving Ben to the skydiving place. You know from this that he lived, but I was driving him to the drop-off zone, and all of a sudden, my mind went to worst case scenario. In the previous few weeks when I'd shared with people Ben was going to go skydiving, a few friends said to me, do you not like Ben very much? And as a parent, I have a strong philosophy on encouraging my kids to be bold, to take risks. And as a parent, I have to be brave in order for them to do that. So I had said, that's a great idea. What a great experience, Ben. Let's focus on what he can get from this, not on what could go wrong. And so I'm driving along, but suddenly my mind went to worst case scenario, which was, you know, #splat. And I'm driving along and I say to Ben, hey Ben, are you nervous at all? And he looks at me and he goes, well, I wasn't. So straight away, my anxiety wore off on him, which is what happens. Emotions are contagious. And when all you do is focus on what could go wrong and get stressed and anxious, you make others feel that way too. It's hard to create an environment where other people are feeling brave and bold when you're stressed out and focusing on all the bad things that could happen. I share that because our minds are wired. Neuroscience, by being able to examine with MRIs the parts of the brains that light up, we are twice as sensitive to potential losses as we are to potential gains. And so that's individually, but as a team and collectively, it's easy to get caught up focusing on what could go wrong. And really, we've got to take that focus and shift it and go, what do we want to make more right? Where are we caught up, worried about the downside of risk, of taking the risk, versus the upside? Where are we not taking into account the downside of not taking the risk? And here's the deal. We are really good at putting ourselves into the shoes of us a day from now or a week from now. If we try something and it fails, oh, I'll look like an idiot, I'll feel rejected, how will this make me feel? What we're not so good of is putting ourselves in the shoes of us 1, 5, and 10 years from now and asking ourselves, how will we feel if we don't be bold and take the risk? And at the end of life, most people regret far more the risks that they didn't take, the conversations they didn't have, the chances and opportunities they got that were requiring them to well and truly get out of their comfort zone, and that they played too safe and risked too little. So that's when people get caught in what we call a risk-averse mindset. It's focused on control. Any control freaks out here? No one's willing to, yes, couple are kind of saying yes, okay. You know what, we need people to, controllers need to be control freaks. But if all you want to do is control every single circumstance, if that's what's driving you, then sometimes it's going to drive you to miss out and not take some of the actions that would actually help you learn and grow and forge new ground. So that risk-averse mindset sees, this is where I know 100% I'm guaranteed to succeed, and everything else, too risky, too dangerous, not doing it. The risk-ready mindset, which I think of as a courage mindset, says, yeah, there's some stuff that's just way too risky, and then there's stuff that I know I'm 100% guaranteed to nail and succeed at, but in the middle is what I call our courage zone. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I don't know for sure that what I'm going to try is going to produce the results I want. I might make a mistake, But I'm going to adopt that experimental mindset and go, you know what, let's just give this a go. Let's try this. Let's do a micro experiment here. Let's contain the potential downside, potential losses, but let's just play with what's possible. So where do you need to spend more time in your courage zone? Where, yes, you might make mistakes, but heck, you might also learn a lot in the process and take that learning in ways that's incredibly valuable. The other way that fear often holds people back is simply by limiting their ambitions. Michelangelo once said, the greater danger isn't that our goals are too lofty and we fail to achieve them. It's that they're too small and we do. The truth is that we are capable as human beings. We know that we only use a small fraction of our own ingenuity and our potential. So much of our lives is spent living in a restricted circle of our own potential as individuals and collectively in teams and organisations. And that is often because we aren't even clear about what it is we truly want. We haven't set a bold vision. Any area of your life that you don't have a vision of what you want, you run the risk of operating on autopilot, going along the path of least resistance. That's just how we're wired. Why would you get out of bed early and exercise unless you had made a decision that you wanted to stay fit and that was important to you? You just wouldn't, because you just go, I don't feel like that. So we've got to create a vision, because vision acts like a compass. I need to spend more time over here doing this. I need to grow these skills. I need to invest in these relationships. I want to build relationships with people over here because I need to engage with those if I want to, and get their support, engagement if I want to go and do this. I need to say no to this and this and this because it's not aligned with my big vision. So I encourage you right now, for yourself individually, think about 5 years from now, if you could have the ultimate vision of success for yourself, what would that look like? And more so, what would that feel like? How would you love to feel? A couple of years ago, my husband was turning 50. And the year before, I'd forgotten his birthday. Well, I hadn't totally forgotten, but it was 4 o'clock. My daughter came home from school and said, what are we doing for Dad's birthday? I was like, oh, that's right. So to make up for that, I was like, the next year, turning 50, I said, honey, what would you like to do for your birthday? And he said, I'd really like to go to Africa and I'd love to, do a safari. Ben, same son again, said, why don't we climb Mount Kilimanjaro though? Wouldn't that be more cool? Well, of course, at the time we were thinking, that's kind of high. But he did this PowerPoint presentation and he said, yes, but imagine how we feel if we all climb Mount Kilimanjaro for Dad's 50th birthday. Anyway, I said, let's do it. My other kids were like, okay, we'll do it. So we were in. And we were operating from a place of possibility. What do I mean by that? Often people just go along on autopilot, just dealing with what's right in front of them. But really, and then they go into default, just reacting. It's like we're just taking that path of least resistance. But being really powerful in how you live your life and in the work that you do requires coming from a place of possibility. What is possible for me, what is possible for us, and for you as an organisation is actually mind-blowing, what's possible. But too often, what's possible gets pulled to the ground because we focus on, well, what's probable. We just kind of get caught in the probabilities. But where do you need to have a vision that's exciting and inspiring, even if it's scary? So we set off to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and as we were getting organised, a few friends that actually do a bit of mountain climbing said, it's quite likely you won't all make it to the top. My youngest was 13 at the time. This was 2 years ago. He's 15 now. And I kind of realised what we were doing was perhaps a little bit more bold and audacious than maybe we had the right to be. We weren't a family that climbed a lot of mountains. We lived at sea level, so we certainly weren't getting altitude climbing training in. But we set off, and on day 5, we got up at 2 a.m. and we started up Mount Kilimanjaro. The base camp is at about nearly 5,000 metres. So the air's pretty thin. I was already feeling a bit nauseous. We started climbing, and within about half an hour, my 13-year-old was crying. His fingers were so cold, it was bitterly cold. Within another half an hour, he was vomiting. Within another half an hour, my other son was vomiting. Within another hour, I was vomiting. I was starting to go, And we were a long way from the top. But we just kept going really slowly. And I'm talking like this slowly. And every 3 minutes we would have to stop. And it was the slowest, longest climb. But step by step, we got to the top. And after 9 hours, we got up there. And everyone was lying there. And I said, guys, we've got to get a photo. So this is the photo that you see. I share it with you because we have no idea what we're capable of, and you have no idea what you are capable of until you set a bold vision. And you must not wait until you know you can achieve it before you set out. In fact, our goals should exceed our current capacity to achieve them. And if we're only doing what we think we're capable of, then we're not actually going to set the bold vision, because we're going to go, if I were waited till I knew that our family could climb to the top of that mountain, I can tell you we would never have set out. So vision equals power. I encourage you to be really clear in the vision you have for yourself individually. And clearly, obviously, this whole conference is about collectively really getting engagement about your bigger vision and the strategies and what you need to do. But just realize that you've got to be willing to get uncomfortable. You've got to be willing to take on things you haven't done before, and be willing to put yourself out there knowing that you might fall short. The thing that stops people, though, often are the beliefs. Well, I'm not very good at that. That's just not my thing. I'm not good with numbers. I'm just not creative. Yesko talked about that. Some people say, I'm not creative. We have stories about what we can do and about what we can't do. Your best thinking got you here, so that means you've got some pretty good thinking here. But what will it take you to get to where you want to go? And if you keep operating off the same set of assumptions and beliefs about what can and can't be done, you will not be able to do what needs to be done. We live in this, we all have stories in our head about who we are and about what we're capable of. And some of them serve us, but some of them hold us back. And just because an assumption was once true or once untrue doesn't mean it no longer is. And I'm sure all of you know people who you feel live a pretty restricted life because of the mindset that they bring to life. But the question is, where are you operating off assumptions that 5 and 10 years from now you might look back on and go, you know what, I wished I'd done that differently. I was just blinkered in my thinking. And the fact is that all of us have what's called a confirmation bias and another psychological bias called perceptual defense mechanism. We are wired. Look around this room right now and look for green. See how much green can you see? Can anyone see green? No? You know, has anyone here, ladies, if you were pregnant, suddenly when you got pregnant, you saw pregnant women everywhere? Or you were going to buy a car and suddenly the car you were going to buy, you saw that car everywhere? You know, it's the same with like looking for green. Suddenly you're looking in that blue, well, that'll do as green. We are wired. We have in our brains looking for things that reinforce what we hold to be true. And so we have to be willing to step back and challenge the assumptions and stories that we hold about who we are, about what is possible. And so if you're dealing with a challenge or problem, I encourage you to step back and ask yourself, where might I be looking at this the wrong way? Where am I making assumptions and telling myself a story about what can and can't be done that simply isn't true? Maybe you tried something once and you failed. Maybe you decided, I'm a failure, or you can't do it that way. But maybe there were factors in how you went about it that, you know, today things are changing. So be very careful that you don't get trapped inside your own thinking. The biggest limits that we have are those we believe in. And likewise, too often people, smart people, and I know there's a lot of smart, knowledgeable people in this room, we get too smart for our own good. We think we know it all. We have the answers. This is the way it is. But the truth is that you don't see the world, nor do you see your industry as it is, nor do you see this company as it is, nor do you see the people around you as they are. You see it as you are through your eyes. And if you find yourself butting heads or struggling with something or with the same problem, step back and ask yourself, What's another way that I could look at this? What is it about the way that I'm looking at this that's actually maybe amplifying or perpetuating the problem? Albert Einstein once said, problems cannot be solved with the same level of thinking at which they were created. But to elevate the thinking actually takes courage. Because you know what? It takes saying, I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. I have 4 teenagers at the moment. And up until child number 4, I actually thought I pretty much knew parenting. And then he came along and right now I'm like just scratching my head going, all right, the strategies that work for child 1, 2 and 3 don't necessarily work for child number 4. I'm having to step back and go, where is it that I've made assumptions about what works that isn't working? Where do I need to try a new approach? So for you, where do you need to step back and adopt a beginner's mind? If you were beginning over, how would you see something? That's why it's fantastic to have diversity in any team. If everybody's thinking the same and looking at things the same way, you're missing out on the incredible richness that comes from having people who disagree. You need to well and truly encourage that and have that level of diversity, but then that inclusion as well. We want people who see things differently. Where do you need to unlearn what you think you know so that you can relearn what it is that you need to know? And I tell you what, the most valuable attribute is just curiosity. Be curious. I wonder how else we could deal with this challenge. I wonder why that person did what seems to me on face value a really stupid thing. They must have had some logic to their thinking, even though I'm quite confounded by it. Where do you need to challenge what it is you think is true? And where do you need to try on another story? And this applies nowhere more importantly than the times when things don't go the way you want them to. Edison did 1,200 experiments before he got that globe to light up. Dyson, the inventor of the vacuum cleaner, 22,000 experiments. Imagine if they'd stopped along the way, they'd done 100 or 1,000 and said, you know what, it's just hopeless, give up. The fact is, as Henry Ford said, failure provides an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. And yet often people are so afraid of failing, they don't actually try things because we personalize failure. We make it mean something about ourselves that we are a failure. Failure is not a person, it's an event. And people who embrace failure, and teams and organisations that embrace failure, and I'm not talking catastrophic failure, I'm just talking failing at getting the result you want, trying something going, we were hoping that was going to nail it, it was going to turn into the billion-dollar deal, and it didn't. Okay, what's the learning? When we have that growth mindset, Carol Dweck wrote a book called Growth Mindset, and she talked about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And people who adopt a growth mindset know that even though we have our strengths and we're naturally good at some things and we're naturally weaker at others, because that's how we are as humans, that we all have the ability to master new skills with practice, and that failure is a valuable tool for learning things that we could never learn otherwise. I remember when I was writing my first book, I went to a very small school with about 13 kids in it in rural Australia. Didn't necessarily have the best grammar classes, and I remember being terrified that if I tried to write a book, I wouldn't be able to write a very good book. And in the lead up to it I finally got it published, and in the lead up to it coming out, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and in my face, in my imagination, my face was on the photo on the front of the New York Times, and it just said underneath, world's worst author. Let's face it, that would have been fantastic publicity. But at the time, I was just feeling incredibly vulnerable that I would fail to write a book that people would like, and that I was going to be exposed as being completely inadequate as an author. And you know, if I had let that fear of not having what it would take to succeed sit in the driver's seat, I would never have written a book. I've now written 4 books, and that particular book, Find Your Courage, is in 6 languages. Yes, I failed to get a New York Times bestseller, but I wasn't even going for that. I was just wanting to get a book into the world. But I share that with you because too often we let our fear of failure keep us from actually trying. We over-personalize the times we make a mistake. And the word mistake breaks down from the Latin misstep. We take a step this way, didn't yield the results we wanted. Okay, all right, reassess, take the learning. Marty Seligman is the founder of positive psychology. It's a whole new field of psychology. And he said you can tell how successful people will be by how they explain their failures. So if you've had a failure in the past and you still feel a bit of shame or embarrassment, or you still feel like a bit of a loser in regard to that, I encourage you to tell a new story about how you're explaining that failure. I also encourage you to think about, what would I do if I was willing to risk more failure, to risk more rejection, to risk more mistakes? And I'm not promoting recklessness and foolishness. I'm just encouraging you to think about where you could be playing too safe, and in doing so, missing out on the incredible learning that you get by just giving something a go. This applies also in the conversations that you have. Where is your fear of something being incredibly uncomfortable, or someone not responding or reacting well to what you have to say, or getting upset, or hurting someone's feelings, or rocking the boat, or ruffling feathers, getting in the way of you having a brave conversation? From saying, you know what, I don't agree with how we're doing this. Or I just need to give you some feedback on this because it's something that's causing you to feel frustrated or resentful. In any organisation, conversations, each conversation is an opportunity to build trust or to erode it. It's a chance to share ideas and to grow greater understanding and to gain collaboration, or it can shut things down. And too often the conversations that most need to occur between one person and another don't occur because people are afraid of how they'll feel and how they'll make other people feel. And so if you think about right now where there's an issue that kind of causes you to feel a bit of frustration or annoyance, maybe it's been going on for a while, I want you to think about, what would you say if you were being brave? And you know, I'm not talking about speaking down to someone and making them feel bad. 3 criteria. Do I mean what it is I'm saying? You know, and if you don't mean it, never say it. 2 is, can I defend it? Have I got evidence to support why I'm saying this? And thirdly, will this serve? What is the highest intention I have for this conversation? And if I truly believe that it's in this person and our team and organisation's best interests for this conversation to occur, then be willing to have that conversation. Because every time you speak up authentically and with the intention to make things better, not just for yourself but for others, you build your currency of trust. And your currency of trust is the greatest way to influence other people and for you to open new doors and forge new ground. So be someone that others can count on. I tell you what, I've worked and coached in organisations now for 15 years, people love people who they know will speak candidly versus saying something and you wonder, what are they really thinking? They're just smiling, they're just kind of saying it to go along. Be someone that others can count on to speak truthfully, even if people don't always like what you have to say. It is far more valuable as a leader, it's far more important to be respected than it is to always be liked. Be someone that others can respect and trust as someone who speaks the truth, kindly but candidly. And finally, when you think about how do you speak the truth with that, what are you focused on? Focus on what it is you want to achieve, what you want to create. What's the stories that you're telling? Because our stories that we tell ourselves can get in the way from having those conversations. And how are you holding yourself physically? Because how we hold ourselves matters, and not just in the conversations that we have, but in the actions we take every day. I want you all to stand up just for a moment. Quick exercise. I want you to find a person. Okay, you're in threes, so I want the person in the middle to be person A. Person A in the middle. You know if you're person A, tap the person A and say you're person A if they're in the middle. All right, great. Now, I want you all just as a little experiment for me, I want you all just to pretend you're focusing on something that makes you feel really negative and lousy. Think of a time you messed something up. I want you to focus on that, and I want you to hold yourself like I'm a bit of a loser. Go on, do it. Notice the posture. Now I want person A, put out your arms like this, and the two people on each side, I want you to touch them at the wrist and press down. Press down. No, you're going to press down on their wrist. That's it. You're going to just measure how strong they are. So they're going to put their hands out, and the people each side are going to press down like this on them. Right. Now I want you wipe the screen clean. Go like that. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you all to think of yourself of a time when you absolutely nailed something. You thought, geez, I'm a legend. Think up, stand tall, feet shoulder width apart, shoulders back, chin up. I want you to hold yourself in your most powerful posture. You're about to do something that's bold and brave, and you're going to put yourself out there. Maybe you're going to walk into a room and you really want to come across with maximum power and presence. I want you to think back of times where you've done things and succeeded. Just think of the last time someone said, oh my God, you're fantastic, or you're great at that, or thank you so much. Think of that. I want you to think about how you would feel if you achieved your boldest goal. Think about that too. Hold yourself really strong. Take a big deep breath into the bottom of your belly. Get that oxygen flowing. Now, all of you should be doing this, and if I don't all see you doing that, I'm coming over and pushing you over. Okay, great. Now, person A in the middle, you're our experimental test case. Put your arms out again, and put the two on each side, press down on their arms. See what you notice. Okay, you may sit down, thank you. The fact is, when we shift our physiology, it shifts our psychology. And what we also know from new studies is that it actually releases little doses of testosterone into our system. So if you know you need to put yourself out there, just like me when I was on that trapeze, stand tall in your power. Focus on what it is you want to achieve. Focus on the value that you have to bring. Focus on the growth that you want to gain. Focus on the success, on the victory. Think about that. Tell yourself a story. I've got this. I can do this. And then you take your step forward. Because here's the deal. If you wait to feel brave before you do the brave thing, you may be waiting until you're 100 years old, and then it's too late. Likewise, how can you, in finishing up, how can you embolden the people around you? Because we as human beings, we are social creatures, and our environment impacts us. And the people around you profoundly impact how you feel. We just heard that. People won't always remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. So how can you make other people around you feel safer? How can you spread that emotional contagion? We talk about emotions are contagious. How can you inspire others to be braver? Who here has people that work for you? Who has people that report to you? When all you do is focus on the consequences of failure, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. Oh, don't make a mistake. What you do is you enlarge the holes in their psychological safety net. And you keep them from being willing to reach out and try new things, to speak up, to challenge, to explore, to experiment. You drive risk-aversive behaviour. But when you are role modelling and rewarding the daring, role modelling the courage, role modelling the effort, role modelling the fact that they're willing to try, and if they speak up and challenge, not just saying yes, but inviting that, when you reward that, you create a culture of courage, which emboldens other people to take more risks, to try things that they wouldn't do otherwise. People play safe when they feel unsafe not to. A guy called David Marquette became a commander of a US submarine, and he got on there, and everybody in the submarine had terrible performance in the US Navy. And he realised there was this culture of fear that permeated everything. There'd been a real command and control type of leadership. So he gave people the freedom to make decisions. When then something was happening, you make the decision. I trust you to make the decision. And over time, their performance took off, and they ended up at the top performing submarine in the US Navy. Why? Because he entrusted people to actually do the right thing. He wasn't trying to control everything. So help make it safe for other people to take risks, for them to fail forward. Go, okay, so that didn't work out. What can we take? What learning can we take from this? And how can we as a whole team benefit from this learning? And when you normalize what I call loyal dissension, when you normalize people being willing to speak up and to challenge, and you make that okay, and it's not about creating a culture where everyone's just disagreeing. In fact, there's incredible cohesion. But people feel safe to speak up and to dissent and to challenge. Say, I know you think that's the bit, how can we do this differently in a respectful way? You get way, way, way more ideas and better execution of ideas. So in finishing up, I want to share a little story. I lived just outside DC, as I shared with you, for 7 years. And there was someone put up this courage wall in a neighbourhood, and people went out and wrote on it. If I had the courage, what would I do? I wish I had the courage too. Oh, I'd ask her out on a second date. I'd go back to study. I'd quit my job. I would ask for a pay rise. I would say I want to do a bigger role, all sorts of things. I want you to think about, what would you do if you were being brave? If you were going to decide that you were going to put yourself out there, whatever that means for you, if you were going to be bolder, more ambitious, what actions would you take? What goals would you pursue? What conversations would you engage in? Where would you start saying no to the good so that you could create space for the great? Where would you risk more rejection? And more so, what will it cost you? What's the opportunity cost that you are leaving on the table if you don't? So as you go through the next couple of days and you hear all of these great ideas, I want you to think about, what would bold execution of these ideas look like for me? And if I was going to take them back into my team and share them with the people that aren't even here, how would I do that, and how would I encourage others to step up, to think bigger, to live that bit braver, and to do the very things that often fear keeps us from doing? Thank you.
Stay there, Margie. Thank you so much for that. Just going to take a couple of quick questions that have come through on Pigeonhole. I love those kind of two lenses that you put, that there's that individual challenge of challenging the story you tell yourself, getting more into the courage zone and out of the comfort zone, and not just seeking that certainty that holds us back, but also how you then create that culture of safety that allows others to be courageous. Let's have a look at what we've got. A few questions on Pigeonhole. We might just pop this one active. How can we make the potential losses of inaction feel bigger than the potential risk of an action? Is that a viable strategy to encourage courageous decision making? I suppose it's that behavioural principle of...
So that takes what I call flipping fear. So our fear is often focused on what will go wrong if we try something, if we take the risk. And so what we have to do, and what I'll often do with people, is get them to be really present to the cost of them not taking the risk. I want you to imagine, I'll say to someone, maybe it's a conversation, maybe they're afraid to put their hand up and, take on a bigger role or whatever it is. And I'll say, I want you just to put yourself, even a year from now, imagine yourself not doing that thing, playing it safe, sticking with what's comfortable, sticking with what's known. Imagine yourself a year from now, and depending on what the situation is, how will you feel if, might you think, I wonder if I tried, or, maybe the opportunity went to somebody else. Maybe somebody else got that idea of yours and they executed and ran with it, and now they're getting all the kudos, glory and wealth. And you're like, damn it, I had that idea. So putting yourself into the shoes of you at a future point in time is a powerful way to kind of
rather
really
than lingering on that New York Times front page of your dreams. Yes. What if the worst case happens? So then a couple of other things I thought were interesting. One was this question about sustaining courage. How do you sustain courage? A lot of people share their opinions. Someone else said, well, how'd you deal with it when your ultimate boss is a bit of a control freak? That was an anonymous question, by the way. But how do you sustain that courage? And if you get that first pushback, go again and go again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact is, being bold and out there can actually take up a lot of energy. It takes up less energy to play safe and just stick with what's comfortable. So it can kind of be a little bit exhausting. I know for me, when say I've launched a book, it can be like I use up my vulnerability quote pretty quickly. Like, I'm just that bravery. So I believe that I shared you that diagram about lead from possibility. Having a vision that is deeply meaningful, that has a very powerful personal why, that really taps that sense of purpose, that, it's scary being out there and it's uncomfortable, but I can't not do this. And a really powerful question that I often ask people is, you need to be able to answer, for the sake of what am I willing to be brave? Again and again and again. And for the sake of what? For the sake of my own integrity, for the sake of not looking back one day and wondering what if, for the sake of being a great leader, for the sake of whatever it is, be clear about, for the sake of what? What do you put at risk if you don't do it? And I think when we have a big enough why, you've heard that saying, got a big enough why, you figure out the how. When you've got a big enough why, it also compels you to continually keep forging that new ground. That said, sometimes we just have to go back into our comfort zone and go, okay, I've got to take a little bit of time off to recharge. And I didn't get into this on this talk, but I think restorative rituals, for me, whether it's exercise or journaling or time in nature or things that kind of recharge our energy, are really vital too.
Two last quick things. One, I thought this was fascinating. What's the benchmark of I'm being creative and bold and courageous enough? Is it because I keep having wins? Or is it actually that I'm racking up a really good list of failures that I can learn from and talk about?
Yeah. Well, and I think you will over time accrue failures, because if everything some people, we think of them as, I actually got to spend a week with Richard Branson a couple of years ago, and often people, it's easy to look at him today and go, oh wow, so successful. But it's had a litany of failures, right? And so it's easy to look at people who are really successful and focus on how successful they are, but there's often many, many stories of failure. If you've never heard of Virgin Cola, there's a reason it was tried and failed. But I think at the core of it, you will have success over time, but I don't know if it's a particular number. I think we all know, did fear sit in the driver's seat, or did a sense of purpose and passion sit in the driver's seat? And you may have a whole lot of successes in a row and not a lot of failures, or you may have a ton of failures. I think if you're continually failing, you need to step back and go, what is it that I'm doing where I continually fail? And maybe I need to get in more input that's driving that.
So last one, and this is the most voted for question, and arguably a more cynical thing, which is, how do you prevent people from then bullying us and saying, well, you're not being courageous, you're being a coward. And actually, you look at their idea, you go, this is a badly thought through idea, or it's full of risk, but they'll now use this as a kind of weapon to bash their idea through.
Well, there's a distinct difference between being brave and courageous and being foolish and reckless, but sometimes there's a fine line as well. How do I know if doing this is brave or I'm just being crazy? And we have to weigh up. And sometimes it's on a personal level, and if it's a team level, well, if it didn't work out, can we afford that? If this all goes pear-shaped, what will that look like? And if that means we're going under, well, that may be a risk that we don't want to take. So we need to have a level of risk tolerance to just take massive risks, certainly without mitigating the downside and being foolish about it. And that's where sometimes going with the least viable product. How can I talked about doing micro experiments. Okay, I think your idea sounds really out there. Let's just contain that and try that over here and see how that goes. And if it's okay, then we can roll it out. But absolutely, I think we have to, and honestly, I usually don't see so much of that, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And I think that's where having people who have the courage to say, I'm sorry, Matt, but that's just
you call it.
too risky. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Margie Warrell.
Thank you very much.